the development of mirages, the indulgence of a fake world. This is the place in which the hero lived. But once he opened his eyes, he immediately saw the whole essence of this world. He saw reality, and seeing such a thing can start to panic. The invasion, the ferocity of strangers, the perfect scenario of living with a childhood sweetheart. The hero was mauled by the girl. He asked her to stop as she could kill him. Once awake, the guy embarked on a whole new path in his life. There was an incredibly thin line between unusual and alien. One could become different by paying the price and sinking into the abyss, or one could master the power of shadows and eventually surpass the god himself. The hero decided to punish the gods. Day, the second gathering place, the first central hospital, ophthalmology. It was Dr. Zhao's first apartment. The doctor turned to the hero. He didn't understand what was going on and assumed there was a mistake in the number, and asked the hero to describe the symptoms again. The protagonist explained that his eyes were not seeing as clearly. The guy's eye was very strained. He looked at the doctor and saw an incomprehensible red streak. The guy kept looking at it. His eyes were distorting the picture, and the doctor asked what the meaning of the streak was. The protagonist watched carefully, and when he managed to focus, he named 18%. The protagonist asked if this was the doctor's age. He got angry and suggested that the protagonist had gotten the wrong department. The hero thought that if that was the death rate, then 18% wasn't that much, and the doctor looked energetic. When asked if the guy was taking alcohol, he said, "No." The doctor was annoyed and didn't even know what to say. The hero tried to come to his senses and apologized to the doctor for being distracted. The man asked the guy to be more attentive, but said he would now examine his eyes. The doctor began to shine a flashlight into the guy's eye. He was told to look to the right. The hero did it, and after a similar examination, the doctor said that the hero's eye looks normal. At the time the guy opened his eye, there was some creature in his reflection. Later in the hallway, the protagonist looked at the people with a sad look. He saw numbers above everyone's head denoting death. The protagonist thought about the fact that he had finally had an epiphany. The protagonist didn't know how to use his ability to see blood streaks. There was a news broadcast on TV. It said that in order to ensure the safety of the public, the Night Watch had opened a new set of candidates. In the 99th year, people had finally managed to create a safe zone. Others were finally starting to retreat. Everyone was hoping to win this war. The protagonist was thinking that it would be good to look around before returning. Suddenly the lace on the guy's shoe came undone, and he crouched down to tie it back on. Suddenly the guy's face changed. He heard voices wondering what they were going to eat today. The main character stood up, and there was a strange green aura around him. The guy was very scared. He looked at the strange creature that was approaching him. Because of all this, he was very scared. The whole city was colored in green tones. A strange girl appeared, who instantly went to attack the monster and cut off his leg. Around the hero appeared a lot of people who were fighting with the same huge number of monsters. The hero assumed that there was a huge problem in this place. He looked up where he saw a sphere with an almost infinite number of lives in it. Droplets of some kind of liquid were falling from the sky. They flew, and one of them hit the protagonist right in the forehead, after which the world became normal and there was a normal life around. Some people helped old people to cross the road. Thanks to the protectors, people's life became better and safer. A peddler was offering a person to buy goods from him. The protagonist pondered over whether their town was safe. He looked at the red stripe above and thought about the fact that it could have been an elaborate lie. Someone took the hero by the shoulder. It was the same peddler who had suggested the hero buy medicine from him. He smiled and talked about how his medicine was just like your official medicine. The hero wasn't really interested. The city was full of monsters, and the man thought he was some kind of medical god. He said that although he wasn't a medical god, he had everything he needed. The protagonist asked if it was free, and the man immediately started to leave because it made him angry. The guy walked over and asked if the man had any divine oil. At that time, during the bus ride, the protagonist was thinking about how expensive it was to buy divine oil, namely for 3,000. The protagonist saw that it was an ordinary street, and he was wrong to treat this place with such suspicion. The bus arrived at the place. The stop is South Street. People were asked to prepare to get off. Repeatedly the hero's face changed again. Everything around him turned green again. The people around him disappeared, and he didn't realize what was happening. But a moment later everything went back to normal. This was the second time this happened during the day. The protagonist was intent on looking around on his way home. Dusk, the protagonist's apartment. He finished taking water procedures. He noticed a strange pattern on his chest and got worried. Remembering the past, the guy realized that he had once seen something similar, and assumed that it was because he had been hit. Then, the book had fallen right on top of him. Now the cover of the book was imprinted on his chest. After a while the hero began to feel pain. It seemed as if his whole body was on fire. The guy took a shower, and began to water his chest abundantly, from which the pain began to subside. Looking in the mirror, the hero saw his value, which was equal to 100. The guy seemed to realize something when he saw his value. He looked back and his shadow started to develop. The hero was very scared because now his shadow was gone. He tried to find it, or at least summon it somehow, but it was unsuccessful. At the moment the shadow appeared again, he was ready to say goodbye to it. The guy was very tired and headed for the exit. As he reached the door, his shadow appeared in front of him, looking at him intently. There was an awkward silence. After a little while the hero approached the shadow and said that he realized that something amazing was going to happen. The hero's heart clenched. The protagonist had good news in that his shadow was not missing, and bad news in that it was waiting. The hero and the shadow stood in front of each other and looked at each other. A little while later at Jian Yu's house. Shadow stood in a strange pose. The protagonist with an interested look asked her to raise her left hand. Shadow did what the guy asked. He told her to raise her right leg, and she did as instructed. The protagonist smiled a creepy smile. He looked at the shadow with a creepy look and said a public shake, which made everything around him start to change. The hero's head ached. He did not understand where such a creature came from. In the chest of the guy there was a fire that flew to the top, and turned into some kind of wheel. It was spinning, and after a moment, the hero got the characteristics of a shadow. The protagonist scrutinized all the information about the shadow, which had the same power as him, only it had no consciousness. The hero checked the density of the shadow, and his hand went through it. The shadow did not react. The protagonist asked if the shadow had all his memories, and it nodded in agreement. The protagonist quickly sat down at his desk and started looking for something. He took out a piece of paper with a task and told the shadow to look at it. He said it was his assignment for the summer, and asked if the shadow could hold his pen. The shadow took the object and waited for instructions. The hero started pawing at it, and didn't understand how it could interact with objects and be intangible at the same time. The shadow did nothing. The hero wondered why she wasn't writing. All that was written on the piece of paper was the word decided. The protagonist angrily took the piece of paper, and said that he would have solved it in 2 minutes. The protagonist asked the shadow to draw a horse. The shadow immediately took up the task. She began to perform the task at a great speed. The protagonist was excited that he would soon see the result. At that time, he decided to look at the shadow's other abilities. One of those abilities was shadow bite. Another ability was shadow absorption, and the hero immediately decided to use it. The hero went to the corner and stretched out his hand in front of him and started to try. The guy failed, and was angry because no one left even a guide. Also, the guy had the ability of shadow pupil, thanks to which he could see the dark side of the world. Now the hero realized that that strange place was the dark side of the world. He decided to use the ability again. the protagonist told the shadow to do some push-ups while he watched it. It began to slowly sink into the floor. The hero screamed as he asked it to do push-ups, and it began to dissolve into the field. After the shadow disappeared, the protagonist was not happy. In the apartment, the protagonist looked around and called out to his shadow. After a short period of time, a portal appeared in the air, from which the shadow flew out. The protagonist thought that the shadow had just escaped for a while. He wrote that he was on the dark side. When asked what he was doing there, he wrote that he was doing push-ups. The protagonist assumed that the shadow's training was better on the dark side. The shadow was ordered to continue its training, and it promptly disappeared into the floor again. The hero sighed, made his way to a chair and sat down. He made the decision to start going about his business. Time passed. The next day came. A snore was heard throughout the apartment. It was the main character who fell asleep right next to the computer. Through the dream, the protagonist was talking about the lush shapes of girls. The guy was woken up by a strange sound. He moved a little as he slept in an incredibly uncomfortable position. Someone shouted for the hero to open the door. He came and opened the door, and said that there was no need to shout like that. Behind the door was Lu Yaoyao, whom the protagonist has loved since he was a child. She behaves very fiery. The protagonist paid attention to the number of blood above the girl's head, which was 93. After thinking for a while, the guy realized that the girl was on her period. The protagonist asked why the girl came so early, and she immediately ran into the room. The girl asked the guy to hurry up and asked what he was doing yesterday. The girl asked him to tell her more details. The guy slammed the door, which scared the girl. She yelled that if the hero doesn't want to tell her, he doesn't have to slam the door. From the fact that the hero closed the door on the wall went cracking, the girl asked what's wrong with the guy, and the guy did not understand how he had so much power. The girl changed her face sharply. She looked at the hero, and repeating his name, she asked if the guy had touched her. The girl knew the guy was lazy, and couldn't understand how he got so much muscle overnight. She touched the guy's arm with her finger, and asked what he did. The protagonist told the girl that he did some exercises, and realized that the shadow workouts were being displayed on him. The girl lifted the guy's shirt, and after looking closely called him a cheater, as it is impossible to punish so many cubes in a day. The girl told the hero it wasn't too late to stop, and he said he wasn't doing anything. The girl grabbed the hero's arm and instantly snapped it. The guy asked the girl to stop, and she pulled out some kind of bracelet and put a pollution index device right on the hero. The girl told him that killing foreign objects and grudges is part of the pollution. If it's not stopped, people turn into monsters. The protagonist knew that his ability came from the guide on the chest, but suddenly an incomprehensible reaction started in that area. The girl pulled out a gun, and the protagonist was very scared. The guy knew that it is impossible that the girlfriend found out everything, so he tried to hide the ability. After the bracelet finished scanning, the girl put the gun away and said that the hero was fine. Finally, the guy could relax. The girl explained that her father taught her to be careful about everything. The protagonist said that he had recently made some drawings and asked if the girl wanted to see them. She was very excited to see them, and they went to the room. After a while, the protagonist lay on the bed and was glad that he had not been discovered. He called up some panel. It told the hero that the shadow was successfully training. Also, the hero learned that the shadow had been training all night. The protagonist began to be covered by the shadow. A shadow body began to crawl out of the floor. It began to materialize in the real world. The protagonist praised the shadow, as he could already feel the results of its training. He said it was time for them to increase the difficulty, and the shadow was fine-tuned. The protagonist started talking about the plank and many other exercises that the shadow was repeating. The hero kept giving instructions, and the shadow repeated everything he asked. The hero even started to get sophisticated and asked for pistol stance and many other complicated techniques. At the time, the girl stood outside the door and listened to all of this. She calmed down as she thought that the protagonist had actually started training. Now she could safely leave the protagonist's house and go read comic books. The main character got outside. He doesn't feel any pain when the shadow trains and gets much stronger. On the second day, when the hero gave the shadow a lot more exercise, his body changed completely. The guy already thought that he would defeat anyone with one blow, although he was determined to continue training. At that time, the hero arrived Uncle Lee, who works in the night watch, so he should be careful. The protagonist was determined to get stronger. While the shadow was training, he was doing bullshit. The shadow continued to train every day. The protagonist also decided to do push-ups. After a huge amount of time, the shadow's training points began to decrease. The protagonist was determined to increase the number of points by going into the shadow world. The protagonist began to vaporize just like the shadow before. He kept sinking into the mouth and eventually disappeared. The guy first found himself in an unknown place that looked more like a liquid, and then he found himself in his room, only the colors were completely different. When the protagonist got out of the room, he was greeted by a creepy sight outside. The protagonist was glad that he was able to get out. He stood all alone in an empty place called the World of Shadows. In the past, he had managed to get out of the room. The protagonist noticed that everything around him was exactly the same as in the real world. Behind his back appeared a silhouette, and for the hero, all that was different from the usual world was that this one was darker. The enemy at high speed approached the protagonist. He thought it was his shadow, and did not hurry to look. When he paid attention to what approached him, it was a monster, which was with long hair. It was ready to strike the guy, but he was able to react at the last moment, and after gathering his strength, he jumped back from the blow. The monster immediately looked where the guy jumped back. It did not intend to let the hero go so easily and continued to attack. The protagonist decided to activate the shadow pupil and dived into the ground, from which he fell out into the real world. This scared the guy, and he didn't understand where the monster came from. He was glad that the exercise made him stronger, and he wasn't hurt too much. The main character was angry that something had interfered with him. He was determined to deal with it. On January 28th, he fought the entity for the first time, but alas, he lost. The next day, the hero also tried to fight the enemy, but was defeated. The next day he was injured, but did not give up trying. The next day the hero decided to regain his strength. The girl noticed that recently the guy often fights, and the same said that scars adorn a man. The girl joked about the scars on his butt, and the hero was in pain. The girl said that since the guy was in pain, his body would soon get stronger. The hero asked the girl what her plans were. There was a month left. She didn't understand what month the guy was talking about, but he explained that there was a month left before the exam. After the beginning of the catastrophe, the structures of culture and creativity suffered a lot, and the people who were engaged in it became the lowest stratum of society. No one was interested in entertainment anymore. Now fights were important, and they took the first place in people's hearts. In order to enter the night watch, you have to pass a martial arts exam from the state, and after successfully passing the exam, life changes dramatically. The girl was practicing her wound. After a little silence, she admitted that she didn't want to participate in the competition. The girl pressed her lips and dared to say that she really wanted to study music. The protagonist said that the girl was free to choose her own occupation, but assumed that her father would be against it. Her father was a high-ranking member of the Night Watch, and she was his daughter. The girl continued to treat the hero's wound. She knew that her father would never agree with her dream. The girl explained that the policy had changed and now anyone could apply for the exam. The guy was confident that the girl would be able to pass the exam. She said that the standards had been lowered and she would definitely pass. The protagonist knew that the girl had very strong abilities. The protagonist thought about the fact that if there were guns in the exam, he would surely fail it. The guy was worried that he might be sent to some kind of reform camp. The protagonist asked the girl for a detector. She didn't understand why, because it's for searching for others. If the protagonist meets one, he'd better run away. The protagonist asked about the other. There was an awkward silence between them. The girl said that they were done, and she was leaving. The hero assumed that her family knew a lot about the other. The girl suggested that the hero was interested in the others, so he would be interested in taking the exams. He said he would have to take them. The girl was interested. The hero said he was interested because he wanted to draw a comic with the others. She got excited about the idea and asked the protagonist to tell her. The protagonist began to tell an incredibly interesting story, which he came up with on the fly, as it was necessary to confirm his words. They sat nicely on the couch and discussed the future manga. The girl told the guy to pass. She asked the hero to stand in her room while she went to her dad's room. The room looked very nice. There were toys and cute pictures everywhere. One thing caught the main character's attention. He saw a book on the bed, a fateful blank. The protagonist started reading a book about brother and sister love. He asked if the girl liked that. She got embarrassed and snatched the book and said she hadn't read it. The girl asked the hero to sit still and not to touch her things. The guy thought about the fact that the girl has not changed at all. Since childhood, the girl loved music and often pestered the hero about it. The guy turned on the tape recorder from which the music began to come. The hero enjoyed the music, remembering the past with the girl. The hero rubbed his eyes, and the girl showed her surprise, because the hero used to hate music. The girl threw to the guy what he asked her. The hero immediately put this thing on his head. He felt as if he began to fall. When he calmed down, he saw a huge number of eyes in front of him. The protagonist looked around. This virtual reality was incredibly cool. It is in such a space that others born of hatred and anger appear. The hero saw monsters similar to those he saw in the hospital. There is a dark world between the monster world and theirs. Gaps have appeared in their world, and monsters from the dark world have started to get to them. The Ninth Sentries control the rifts, but some manage to slip through. The shadow world is updated every 3 months, updating the picture of the world. It is during this period that others infiltrate their world. There was a huge amount of contamination in the shadow layer that could turn a person into an other. A monster appeared behind the hero. The guy decided to look back, but some beam destroyed the creature. There was a huge explosion. The hero was a little lost, and as soon as he came back to normal, he saw a special person. The protagonist admired the special one and hoped to become the same after the exam. In fact, the special one is a different one, only with a human body. He is able to control his power, but at the same time, he dies because of it. Special people are always afraid with pollution and alienation. And after death, they have a big chance to become different. So when they realize that death will soon befall them, I try my best to expend all my strength. The main character took off his glasses and enthusiastically shouted, "Wow!" The girl asked what's wrong. The protagonist said he needed time to think about this much information. The guy asked the girl to stretch him. The protagonist promised the girl 3 original paintings, whose contents she could decide. She immediately agreed and got behind the guy's back. She said that her neck was getting stiff because of constant workouts. The hero showed the girl his abs, and she scrutinized them. At that time, the girl's father arrived home, who was out of anger. Later at the table, they all ate together. The main character paid attention to the man, who was showing his anger to everyone. The girl said that the father got it all wrong. He asked if he could have been deceived by his own eyes. The girl tried to explain something, and finally asked the hero to say something. The hero said he would drink 3 glasses as punishment. He began to drink a lot, and the man was angry, as the guy implied that there were reasons for this. The father started to run after his knife, and the daughter stopped him. The main character along with Lu Yaoyao are childhood friends, but they are completely different. He was a bully while the girl was a studious daughter. The protagonist didn't know why, but the girl liked to play with him. The protagonist thought that maybe it was because he had helped her once. The hero was protecting the girl from two evil guys. The girl followed the hero even when he pretended to be a pro. Then the hero was hit on the head, and the girl was called a poor girl. The protagonist remembered that Uncle Lu had always been wary of him. Even now the man looked at the hero as an enemy of the people. The man wanted to smoke a cigarette, but his daughter made a serious look and snatched the harmful thing right from his mouth. The man asked in a rough voice what the guys were doing. The hero said that they were watching information about the different and special. The man looked at his daughter, who pretended not to know anything. The man breathed a sigh of relief. He made a serious face again and asked the protagonist if he knew why the government didn't give this information to the students beforehand. The protagonist didn't quite understand why. The man explained that there are evil people, and some things are better for them not to know. The man explained that not everyone has the willpower, and with a misstep a person can become different. The man explained that only people with sufficient physical fitness can cope with the world of the others. He also said that it was incredibly dangerous in this world. The man hoped that the protagonist understood everything. The guy smiled and said he understood. The protagonist said that he would definitely not miss the exam this year, and he was confident. The man thought about it, but he was interrupted by a call, reporting an urgent mission in the shadow layer. The man immediately jumped up and advanced to the location. The man before leaving told the guy not to upset him, and then he would be taken to the night watch squad. The protagonist told the man not to worry and promised that he and the girl would not do such a thing, but she started to fight with the guy as it embarrassed her. At that time, the city was bustling with life. The main character planned to find out more information, but only got the basic information. The guy knew that after his uncle learned these materials will be hidden, and he will not see them again. Suddenly the guy's phone rang. He picked it up, and it was a girl. She asked the hero to take 2 packages of pads, but she was just shy. There was a month left until graduation. The effect of shadow training was weakening. Now the hero was determined to add real training as well. The hero noticed that the propaganda against the others has increased. The hero also noticed that more people than usual had signed up for the exam. Looking up, the guy had a bad feeling, as if something terrible was about to happen. He decided to calm down as he was stressing out a lot. Going around the corner and checking for people around, the hero started moving into the shadow world. Little by little dissolving, he studied the dark world. He immediately got into a fighting stance as he noticed some creature. Looking closely, it resembled a human. It was approaching the hero. His blood count was 14%. The hero stepped back. He didn't understand what the man he lives in the same building with was doing here. The guy fell right in front of the hero. There was silence. The guy noticed his blood count was extremely low. He also saw the children and the creature he had fought earlier. It was standing right next to the children. The protagonist noticed that the monster's blood level was 24%. The protagonist prepared to fight the monster. A little while ago, this man had complained that the Night Watch had a lot of work to do. He thought when he was a civilian that work was honored, but now he's working overtime. The guy heard the heads of children calling for help. They were being dragged by some kind of monster, a different kind. The boy was surprised, as he had never seen an other dragging people into his world. The children were begging to be rescued, and were almost completely on the other side. Without realizing the risks, he jumped, he flew after them, and promised to help them. He grabbed hold of the child's hands, and together with him began to fall to the other side. At first, he was between worlds, but after a short period of time, he found himself in a dark world. The guy thought he was finished, as he didn't even have a weapon with him. At that time, the enemy had already made his attack. The guy reacted immediately and kicked it away with his foot. His kick dispelled the enemy's attack. The guy noticed that the gap through which they had gotten here had disappeared. He looked carefully ahead. There were others everywhere, and he, who had managed to lose all his skills, had to fight them. For this man, the biggest burden was the crying children. They sobbed and said they wanted their mommy. The guy sent out a distress signal and hoped for reinforcements. The boy gave the children a device to help with the pollution and thought about doing everything he could to make sure the children survived. The boy asked if the guy would take them home. He promised that he would, so he asked the kids to stay close, at which time a monster appeared and was ready to attack the boy. The boy at the age of 18 took a martial arts exam, and upon entering school, he began to work hard to become a valuable fighter. In his second year, the kid won first place in a fight against the others. He rejoiced, but later he learned that his strength was not enough, because in the world of others diligence is not the first place. The guy was in despair, as he could not overcome the barrier of strength. As a result, he had to switch to humanitarian, doing civilian watch. The guy prepared himself before the battle and started moving in different directions. At that time, the enemy was already near. The guy assumed that the level of the other was somewhere around medium. The enemy started growling a horrible scream. The guy got a little worried, but he was still prepared for the unfortunate. The monster charged at him, and he fought back. Turning his leg, he was able to strike the monster with the force of his whole body right on the jaw. The creature looked at the guy with a blank stare. The guy, on the other hand, thought that everything was going well. Even the old feelings of battle were returning. In an instant his face changed, as the monster lashed out with its arm and drove the guy into the wall. The guy wanted to dodge, but his body couldn't keep up with his mind and eventually failed. The enemy began to attack with slashing blows. The guy with all his might tried to dodge. His body was getting heavier. He compared the feeling to that of being pierced by numerical needles. He kept running, but he realized that he couldn't go on like this and had to think of something. He began to use the shadow power on his fist and struck using his blinding ability. The monster was enraged, and he threw another punch that knocked him down. The guy's pollution was growing as each time he used the skill it increased. The enemy was furious. They headed out to attack each other. Their attacks were supposed to collide now, but in the end the guy got hit right in the stomach, which began to fly off, hitting the ground. He began to cough up blood. He could not expect that the monster so quickly get used to his skills. The enemy was already near the guy. He was very upset that he had no talent. But he continued to fight even though he realized that he couldn't win. The only thing he could do was to last long enough. The children watching the fight were terrified, the boy looking tired and wrinkled, his body pierced by the monster's attacks. After another monster attack, the boy was driven into the ground. He was left lying there thinking that this was the moment his life was over. At the age of 15, the guy's entire family was killed for this very reason, and at the age of 18, he took an exam. At 20, he was expelled from his sophomore year, and at 21, he joined the civilian watch. He stopped seeing hope. In front of him was a huge monster that would soon finish him off. Gathering all the will in a fist, he decided to do at least something before dying. His body began to cover with a black aura. He gathered all the possible strength and was determined to start the second round in the battle against the monster. The guy stood in a fighting stance right in front of the monster. He started screaming from adrenaline. The enemy made several lightning-fast blows, but he easily dodged them and counterattacked with his foot. The monster stepped back a bit, and the guy filled his fist with aura and started to make a huge number of blows right on the enemy's face. He was intent on hitting as hard as he could, striking hard, but little by little he began to lose the creature. He felt as if the world around him began to float. The monster took advantage of the moment and attacked the man. The man flew far forward. Lying on the ground, he was disappointed that his skills were not enough. Even with the help of the pills, he couldn't win. He was angry that he was so weak. Suddenly he noticed a person appearing in the world. This person was the protagonist, who didn't understand what was going on here. He thought about who the protagonist could be, but nothing came to mind. The hero told this man to rest and rely on him. He knew that the entrance and exit to such an area is heavily controlled, and a normal person can't get in here. At that time, the protagonist was hit right in the face. After that he flew far away. The guy thought that the hero was surprisingly weak. The enemy was about to deliver a killing blow, but the hero intervened, which struck the palm of his hand to appease the monster. The hero was out of breath. He said that his opponent was him. Possession was in full swing. The enemy struck a blow from which the hero dodged. He took a glass bottle and smashed it right on the monster. The enemy pulled out his sharp weapon and tried to cut the guy, but he went behind his back and prepared to strike with the sharp side of the bottle. The protagonist easily dodged all the attacks, as he already knew him completely, while the guy attacked the enemy many times with a sharp bottle. The monster screamed a lot. Because he could not cope with the hero, he retreated. Observing this, employee was shocked that a seemingly weak man suppresses such a monster. The hero shouted that it was his turn to defeat the monster. He managed to get closer, but was stopped by the monster's tail. The hero flew into the wall. He coughed and realized his mistake. The enemy went to kill the hero. The hero did not know what to do. He is not alone here, so escape is not an option, as all the guys who are here will die. The protagonist saw that the enemy had 20% of blood left. He was not going to stop. At that time, the half-dead guy advised to attack in the right rib. The protagonist began to quickly close the distance with the enemy. The enemy reacted and a little deflected. The hero, this made him smile, and he was instantly to the left of the monster. The guy attacked him in the sore spot, and he began to scream in pain. The enemy began to run away. The hero was very surprised by this. The monster flew near the man, and the man was frightened, as the monster headed towards the children. The enemy wanted to get the blood of the children. It was already near the children. It had already opened its mouth to devour the poor children. They were trembling with fear, and at the last moment, when it seemed that their lives were over, the protagonist with all his might squeezed the can with a drink, and threw it straight forward. At great speed this can flew into the enemy, but he stopped it, and when it seemed that nothing would save the children, intervened half-alive employee, who from the last strength filled his punch aura and hit the monster. After this attack, the guy's body fell to the ground, and he started coughing up blood, but the enemy was furious and pointed his fangs at him. Before eating the guy, the hero intervened and managed to hold the monster's head with his hands. He told the enemy to die and bit his neck, causing his blood count to drop rapidly. The hero pressed the enemy to the ground and began to beat him with all his might, from which the blood count dropped very quickly. The hero was striking many blows at the lying enemy and concentrating a huge part of the force in his fist. He struck a mazi blow, which penetrated the flesh of the enemy. The protagonist screamed from the release of force, and from the fight aura began to spread around. It spread more and more, until the monster began to tear to pieces. The protagonist was covered in his blood and breathing heavily. The result of their fight was destroyed. The boy lay unconscious, just like the children. The protagonist breathed in all his lungs, and rejoiced that he was finally able to take revenge. After that, his body weakened, and he began to lose consciousness. Everything was on fire and destroyed. People were lying on the ground unconscious. The whole city was in fire and destruction. The protagonist could not understand what happened to the fence place. Suddenly he noticed a strange thing. He was surrounded by a huge number of others. They immediately went on the attack on the hero, who did not have time to come to his senses. He reacted too late, and his body had already been pierced by many enemy attacks. He was completely covered by the others. Gourd, on the other hand, continued to burn and collapse. The sun disappeared. The dark side enveloped the world and hope was lost. Some danced and some screamed in pain. Some fought and died in silence. Some understood and some did not. There was a voice that asked the hero to wake up. When he opened his eyes, he saw a man in front of him. When the hero came to his senses, he said he was alive. The protagonist noticed that, after killing someone else, his memories were cut off. The protagonist pressed his finger on the forehead of the other, and said pupil shadow. The hero smiled, and the guy was worried for the protagonist, as the fight was horrible. The guy was somehow alive with 10% blood, 70% was a light wound, 50 was a moderate wound, 30 was a gray wound, 19 was on the verge of death, and 5 people could say their last words. The hero was surprised the guy could stand on his feet. He suggested they sit against the wall, and they did. The guy assumed the hero wasn't a member of the Night's Watch. The hero was surprised that he was not recognized, as they live in the same house. The hero confessed that he is not a member of the Night Watch. The guy said that he did not believe the hero, because the other was very strong. He began to laugh, and wondered how strong people from the watch were. The boy called the hero funny. He patted the hero on the shoulder, and said that hitting him with soy sauce a lot was very clever. The hero thought about how it was a feat to laugh in such a state. The guy asked where the hero was studying, and the guy said that Bade was a sophomore. The guy began to wonder if he was going to major in humanities or martial arts. He answered his own question, as he thought the hero was too strong for humanities. He asked the hero for a cigarette, and the hero said he only had cookies. He broke the cookie in two, and gave one half to the guy and ate the other half. The protagonist explained that during the battle all the cookies had broken. They sat near each other, and chewed the cookies in silence. The guy assumed that it was the hero's first time killing someone else, and the guy said it was. The guy confessed that he was jealous of the hero, as he was mediocre in martial arts, and the hero advised him to talk less to conserve his strength. He said that it's not every day that a civilian gets the chance to fight others, and admitted that he was very weak. He said he couldn't even resist a wave of contamination. The protagonist asked how the civilian got here. The guy clenched his fist and said he had no regrets, as it was his choice. The guy started yelling and saying he wasn't happy. The hero tried to calm the guy down. The guy said that the rescue team would be here soon. The protagonist said that eased his anxiety and said he would be leaving. The guy stopped the protagonist as it was too dangerous and he wanted to chat. The hero realized that it was time for him to leave. He was very tired of this talk. Time passed. The hero still stayed with that guy, who still hasn't stopped talking. He told funny stories. The guy with a smile on his face asked to give one of the teachers a message. The hero, on the other hand, felt uncomfortable. He was very tired of talking. The guy asked to say thank you to one of the teachers. The hero offered to take a notebook to write down all the wishes of the guy. He thought deeply. He said that he had been carrying this around for a long time and wanted to find someone to tell everything to. He looked sad and said that it would be nice to go to the academy again. He asked the main character for a cookie, and he noticed that the guy liked it. He lowered his hand and asked the hero to forget about it. A portal began to open in front of them. The guy assumed it was the Night Watch that had been sent to help them. The protagonist said that was fine and was about to leave. He grabbed his groceries and headed somewhere else. The guy asked why the hero wouldn't go with him. He said he would get there on his own. The guy sighed nostalgically and wished the hero a happy journey. The hero thanked the guy for the nice words and started to walk away from the sad guy. When the hero turned around, he saw the members of the Night Watch who had arrived on the scene. The protagonist started to disappear from the shadow world. Looking at the guy's blood percentage of 10, the squad member nodded to the other, and the hero was very surprised. As the guy's blood percentage started to drop rapidly, he couldn't understand why the blood percentage was dropping, They are supposed to help him. The hero watched as his companion began to disappear, and the other squad members saluted him. For his feet the blood percentage reached 0, and the guy left this world forever with a smile on his face. The hero could not understand how it happened and asked to wait, but the process of teleportation was not cancelled, and he seemed to be in the real world. People around were whispering about the strange hero, who was in the middle of the city. The guy seemed to be saddened by the death of his companion. He remembered the man's words that the special ones should never give up. He was talking about how even on the verge of death one could take a pill for strength, but die with a 90% chance. They had to remember the death of their comrades. A little while later, the protagonist was in the elevator going up to his floor. He couldn't believe that his companion had died so easily. As he exited the elevator, he kept thinking that the man was always joking around while he was chatting with him. The protagonist realized that the man just wanted to find a companion before he died. Opening the lock, the protagonist thought about the fact that the man left quietly, just like a regular guy. The protagonist promised himself that no matter how ordinary the guy was, he would never forget him. With a saddened look, he grabbed his head. Since he was very tired, he decided to go to sleep. The protagonist had 55% blood, and he could barely walk. It was even scary to imagine how the interlocutor with 10% felt. The hero realized that training only the body is not enough. He decided that willpower also plays a huge role. A girl's voice was heard, which frightened the guy. She complained about the fact that the hero does not answer the phone, and he was not at home. The protagonist began to talk about the fact that there were huge lines in the store. He abruptly turned around and asked where the girlfriend got the keys to his house. She told him that Uncle Lee had asked her to take care of the guy. The girl took a closer look and assumed that the main character had gotten into a fight with someone. The guy said it was getting late and the girl should go home. God forbid the uncle would get it wrong again. The girl started grabbing the hero and ordering him to turn around. She looked at the hand she grabbed and made a very worried look. The girl asked how the guy could get hurt like that. The hero tried to run away from the house, but they wouldn't let him go. He made up a story that he was attacked and robbed, and later got revenge. The hero started furiously telling how he defeated the criminal. The girl, on the other hand, silently put her hand on his face and made the most worried look possible. She was just very worried about the guy. He realized that the girl would never believe such nonsense. The team was a mess. The hero and the girl stood there silent. She asked if it hurt a lot. The hero said that everything was fine. He just wanted to sleep. She was embarrassed and turned around and said that she would tell everything to her uncle, so that the guy would no longer take at night. The hero started begging the girl not to do it, but she wouldn't listen. The hero fell on the floor and said he was too weak. The girl said the guy needed to go to the hospital, and he said he had all the medicine at home. The girl looked at the hero and said she wouldn't give him the medicine, but he asked her to patch him up. The guy started screaming in pain. He asked the girl to help him instead of turning him into a mummy. She hit the guy and asked him if he would do it again. He promised he wouldn't. She demanded an oath, and the hero said he wouldn't. The hero said it's in his nature. He can't do it without fighting. The hero said he would just watch, not get into fights. The girl said she was leaving, and the hero suggested she stay the night. She turned around and gestured that he was mean. The door slammed shut. The hero remained lying on the couch. He thought about the fact that the guy asked him to pass the last ones to the educational institution. He thought about something and jumped up, since his friend did not even give his name. Because he had killed the Anong, a shadow bite had consumed him. The hero wondered which was faster, the defensive kill or the shadow bite. The hero used an ability to watch his new skill, Blood Strike. It is a stealthy attack from the shadow. The protagonist jumped up from the bed. He got into a fighting stance and shouted Bloody Strike. After that nothing happened. He was angry and blamed everything on the system. It occurred to the guy that maybe the problem was that there was no target for the attack. He sat down on the couch and decided to try it sometime in the future. The protagonist decided to scrutinize his characteristics. He noticed that his shadow had changed, and now he could merge with it and fully control it. This ability was an imbo. The speed of training, and in the case of injuries, could be survived. Looking carefully, the hero saw that if his blood level drops to 99, he will die. He started screaming, saying that it was stupid. The hero decided to try a new ability and ordered his shadow to come out. A shadow started to appear from the floor. After a small amount of time, it practically came out. The hero pointed his finger at it, and it repeated his movement. As they approached each other, they came in contact, and the shadow began to merge with the hero, or rather it seemed to cover his body, which eventually made the guy's body look like a shadow. The hero began to examine his new body. He inhaled a full lungful of air and began to move very quickly. It seemed as if lightning was sweeping across the room. He ran, tearing down all the things around him. His strength was also at the highest level. He easily lifted the couch and could lower and raise it without any difficulties. The protagonist decided to test the defense and hit himself with a 100-kilogram hammer. It did him absolutely no harm, and the guy was rejoicing. He heard the voices of the neighbors asking him to calm down finally. The protagonist appreciated the shadow form, as the possibilities it gave were cosmic. The protagonist saw that he could discover something new. He could fully acquire this skill, and no one else in the world could have it. The protagonist wondered if he should take the risk or not. The hero was confused that the system highlighted the word risks in red, and it could be dangerous. To the guy's great surprise, the system chose the answer yes. The protagonist began to be covered with shadows. Things fell and time began to fly. After a long period of time, the protagonist stood up. The protagonist received the skill of the assassin and became much stronger. The protagonist noticed that now he is able to damage even the god himself. Now the hero's fighting ability was much higher. He had the ability to see the critical level of the blood streak when the victim dies himself. The hero could now use the decapitation ability when attacking. The guy stood and thought deeply. He thought about the fact that when he killed another, probably the decapitation skill had worked. Now the hero had absolute damage and decapitation. He stood in a fanatical stance and shouted that he was now invincible. The guy seemed to be thinking about something. He furiously began to remove his bandages, and it turned out that there were no wounds left on him. Even the deepest wounds were gone. The protagonist began to skin one of the wounds. He was surprised that the shadow form gave such cosmic regeneration. At the time, there was a picture of the hero on his phone with a post of him fighting. The guys were discussing the hero's situation, and the guy suggested they go and visit him. The hero's sweetheart said they shouldn't listen to him, as he was actually being chased by an angry dog. She thought about the hero being a real fool, as he brags a lot. At that time, they arrived at Jiang Yu's house. The girl, before opening the door, said that the guys could see for themselves. She inserted the key, and suddenly a question sounded where the girl got it from. She got excited and replied that her uncle gave her the key. Then she opened the door and sporadically said that she and the guys had come to visit him. At the same time, the hero was screaming in pain. He called the system useless as his wound opened up. The guy explained that he thought it had healed, so he took off the bandages. The guys already thought that the hero was not lying, since he had such wounds. The guys began to examine the hero, who was now very pumped up. The girl joined the conversation and told the guys to go to the living room. Suddenly there was a loud scream of the hero. The guys were even a little scared by the girl's methods. At that time, the girl was using an ointment that brought pain. The girl said that this ointment did not hurt at all and asked the guy to stop. The hero, on the other hand, was scrutinizing the girl's legs. He was embarrassed and didn't even listen to what he was told. She noticed the lustful look of the guy. The girl said that since the hero often fights, she asked him to give her some medicine. She looked at the guy carefully and started pulling his cheeks. The girl couldn't understand what the hero was doing yesterday and asked him not to brag or talk nonsense. The guy said it was a chivalrous act of justice. The girl said that this is complete nonsense. The hero changed the subject to ask how long Uncle was back, but he wasn't really back. The hero said that the night watch works very hard and in very dangerous places. The girl thought about it. She was also worried about her father. The hero noticed the girl's worries. The hero thought that being a member of the night watch is very dangerous. The uncle lost his arm. His acquaintance died at a young age. The girl asked, if the hero passes the exam, will he go to the night watch? The hero thought about this question. He didn't know how to answer it, but after a moment, he said the first thing he thought of, which was that he didn't know. He made a lustful face and asked if there were any hotties there. The girl started pulling his cheeks and asked him to close his mouth. At that time, the guys were standing outside the door and eavesdropping. Hearing strange sounds, they thought the wrong thing. The main character along with the girl came out of the room. The guy asked why the friends had come. They said that they had heard that the hero was hurt and came to see. Looking at the hero's arm, they thought that they were hickeys. The protagonist said that he would live and invited his friends to sit down. The guy started telling his made-up story to his friends. The girl said she would go to the store and throw away the torn clothes. The main character didn't look at the girl and said to throw it away, but immediately his face changed and he rushed towards her, as he said he had stuff left over. A packet fell out of the thing. It was pads. Seeing something like that, the girl immediately had a question. Why would a guy do that? The main character said that he noticed that the girl had a stomach ache and wanted to give it to her to make her feel good. The guys were taking pictures and thinking about how close their relationship was. The hero gave it to the girl and said that in case of anything, she could feel free. She squeezed the pack of pads with all her might, and embarrassed started yelling at the guy. She threw the compressed packet right at the hero, from which he got a bump on his forehead. All the friends left, and now the hero was alone. He used the shadow pupil, and a circle appeared under his feet. He used the shadow form, and his body started to be covered with tattoos. Now the guy was determined to start training. After a moment, the hero was completely troughed by the shadow. The hero should feel a lot of pollution, but only comfort was felt. He felt as if he had previously lived in a polluted environment and had just now breathed in clean air. The guy evaluated his condition. His stomach stopped hurting and his blood volume increased. Now the hero was determined to start. He fell on the floor and tried to start push-ups, but because of the huge force, he was thrown right into the ceiling. He got a little hung up and fell to the floor. The guy's eyes lit up. He said in his ears that he had inexhaustible energy around him. He started doing hundreds of push-ups. The hero started receiving many system notifications that he was getting stronger. His physical condition was getting stronger. The hero said he was getting thousands of ways to get stronger. He decided to leave the building and train outside since there was not much room. He ended up outside. He assumed since he was so strong, shouldn't he be worshipped? The hero jumped up to the bar and started spinning like crazy. At that time, in the headquarters of the Night Watch, people with serious faces were heading somewhere. They arrived at an office with a huge desk. One man told that there was a huge problem in the shadow layer. He told of the many gaps that had been discovered. The girl said that it would be difficult for them since the contamination mostly covered residential neighborhoods. She said it was definitely not an accident. Everyone sat there deep in thought. The man was thinking about the fact that there were more of the others lately. He was thinking about the fact that there had been at least 4 cases of people being dragged into the shadow layer. He considered the case of the dead hero's friend. He thought about the fact that although the number seemed small, they didn't know when the others would attack next. The breaches were much more dangerous than the shadow layer anomaly. The man said that if you compared the other to a beast, it felt as if Godzilla had launched its attack. The one-armed man told everyone not to be discouraged. He asked them not to act like they lost. He said that they would be able to take the fight together anyway. The guys were silent. Everyone immediately cheered up after these words. Morale was raised. The man said that the man could continue. They continued to discuss business. After a while, a man was standing by the window, complaining that this was happening right before New Year's Eve. Suddenly his face changed. What he took was not a cigarette. It turned out that he had been switched from cigarettes to cookies. A packet flew at the man. He easily caught it with his hand. Looking in the direction of the throw, he saw a one-armed man who asked what was wrong with the man's face. He said he wouldn't smoke because he didn't want lung cancer. The one-armed man started laughing and wondered if the man was frightened by this. He asked for no bullshit and asked why he left him. He exhaled heavily and said that more information came from upstairs. The man was very surprised and asked to be told. He seemed frightened of what was waiting for him. He calmed down and began to wait. He asked if there was confirmation, and the one-armed man said to take the laptop and check. He opened the laptop. There was a request to recruit new people. They started talking about the man's daughter, and he didn't know where she was going to go. The man said he thought the guy wasn't being honest about his abilities. The one-armed man said he didn't think so. The man suggested that he wanted to give the boy to the humanities, but the man said he would give him to the regulars. The man said it's too early to say until the hero has been tested, because if he's special, admission will be mandatory. The one-armed man started to leave and finally said that he would see what would happen. He was asked to be clearer, but he didn't add anything else. The girl apologized for disturbing the men. She gave the man a message from the shadow layer. He began to scrutinize the contents. It said something about a shadow called the Mad Sportsman. It said that the target was not interested in attacking and was completely devoted to the sport. When a detector approaches him, he turns training and salutes. The girl said that the other one is very strange, and it was not mentioned before. The man couldn't understand at all what kind of man I was. At that time in the shadow layer, the victim was another spider. The hero said that the meat of the spider is very urgent, and it has a lot of protein. The protagonist was thinking that he would soon become popular, as he was posting videos from the shadow layer. The protagonist was posting a post with a spider when suddenly something buzzed. It was the system. He carefully read the contents of the notification. He got very angry and tried to hit it, but noticed that he only had 100 hours to complete the task. He was very upset that his life was going to end after 100 hours.